So I'm looking at question 2 from the direct and inverse proportion exercise from MyiMaths, and just looking at the first question from question 2. Fill in the missing values, give your answers to 2 decimal places. Y is inversely proportional to X. So there's 2 things, Y and X. And when 2 things are inversely proportional, it means that the one thing equals some number divided by the other thing. So y equals k divided by x. We're going to call that missing number k. Y is some number k divided by x, and we need to figure out what that k is. So we've got some information. When x equals 2, y equals 12. Okay, so we can put those numbers in, 12 and 2. So y equals k divided by 2. I don't like fractions, so I'm going to multiply by 2 to get a whole k instead of k over 2, but because an equation is like a balance, I need to do the same thing to both sides, and that gives me 24 is equal to k. K is equal to 24. So I'll just replace the k there with 24, and we figured out that the relationship between y and x is that y equals 24 divided by x. Well, now that we've done that, we can start filling the table in, because we've got the relationship between the 2 variables, and the first question says, or the first part of the table we've got to fill in, when x is 4, what is y? So I'll just take that x and replace it with a 4, and I get y equals 24 divided by x. 24 over x, 24 divided by x, which is 6, of course. So when x is 4, y is 6. So I will just fill that in, and then on to the next one. And on the next one, we've got to figure out what x is when y is 240. So again, I'll start with the basic relationship between y and x. Y equals 24 divided by x. And on this occasion, y is 240. So 240 equals 24 divided by x. And we'd like to figure out what x is. Well, because x is at the bottom of the fraction, it's just slightly trickier to get to what x is, but I'm going to start by trying to get rid of the fraction by multiplying both sides by x. So if I multiply the right hand side by x, I just get a whole 24 instead of 24 divided by x. But because an equation is like a balance, I want to do the same thing on the other side. So multiplying 240 by x, I get 240x. So 240x's are equal to 24. I just want to know what one single x is, so I need to divide everything by 240. So 24 divided by 240 is 0.1. So when y is 240, x comes out to be 0.1. So we'll just fill that in on the MyiMaths, 0.1. And on to the next question. So I'll just rub all of this out, and it says b is inversely proportional to a squared. Okay, so we've got 2 things going on here. We've got b, and then we've got not a, but a squared. And again, because they're inversely proportional, it means that the one thing equals some number that we've got to figure out divided by the other thing, and we'll call that number k for these purposes. So b equals k over a squared is the relationship between b and a, and we need to figure out what that k is. And we've got some information. We've got the information that when a equals 2, b equals 180. So if we stick those numbers in, 180 for b and 2 for a, so we've got 2 squared there. We've got 180 equals k divided by 2 squared. We can tidy that up a bit. 180 is equal to k divided by 4, and multiply both sides by 4 to get a whole k is equal to 720. So k is 720, and then I can go back to the original thing and replace the k with 720 and say that in this case the relationship between b and a is that b equals 720 divided by a squared. Okay, now we've figured out the relationship, we can fill in the table. So the first bit of the table is when a is 5, we've got to figure out what b is. So I'm just going to take that a equals 5 and stick it into this relationship. So b equals 720 over 5 squared. I've just replaced the a with a 5. So 720 over 5 squared, that's 720 over 25, because 5 squared is 5 times 5, which makes 25. And then that's going to be 28.8, isn't it? Just trying to do that in my head. B is 28.8. So that's the answer to the first one. When a is 5, b is 28.8. Need a decimal in there, don't I? 28.9, nearly right. 28.8. Okay, and then the next bit is we need to figure out what a is when b equals 12. Okay, so once again I'll just take my basic relationship between a and b that I've figured out and stick the number in that we know, which is 12. So 12 equals 720 divided by a squared, and we'd like to figure out what a is. Well, again, because the a is in the bottom of a fraction, it's going to take an extra step just to pick it out. I'm going to multiply both sides by a squared to get rid of the fraction, so that on the right I just get a whole 720, but on the left, because I've multiplied both sides by a squared, I get 12a squared. I'd like to get the a squared bit on its own because I'm trying to figure out what a is, so I'm going to divide everything by 12. 720 divided by 12 is 60. So a's got to be the square root of 60. If a squared is 60, a's got to be the square root of 60, which I'm going to need my calculator for. It's going to be 7 point something, isn't it? Because 7 times 7 makes 49, and 8 times 8 makes 64. So it's got to be somewhere between 7 and 8. So let's have a look. Getting my calculator, if I can do that. There we go. And I want the square root of 60, which comes out to be, right, so 7.7459. It says in the question, give your answers to 2 decimal places. Let's just move that away from the logo. So to 2 decimal places, that will be 7.75. A equals 7.75 to 2 dp decimal places. Okay, so let's fill that in on here. 7.75. And on to the next one. So the next one says Q is inversely proportional to P cubed. So we've got 2 things going on here. We've got Q and we've got P cubed. So Q is equal to some number that we've got to figure out divided by P cubed. And we've got some information. We've got that when P equals 5, Q equals 5. So we can stick those 5's in and say 5 equals the number we've got to figure out, K, divided by 5 cubed. So 5 cubed is 125. 5 times 5 times 5. 5 equals k divided by 125. So get rid of the fraction by multiplying by 125 to get a whole k. But then we've got to multiply by 125 the other side. So multiplying both sides by 125, we get that k is 625. So we can go back to the original thing and replace that k with a 625, and we figured out that the relationship between q and p is that q is equal to 625 divided by p cubed. Okay, so now we've got to figure out some missing values in the table when p equals 6. So we've got to figure out q when p equals 6. So q equals 625 divided by 6 cubed. 6 cubed is 6 times 6 times 6, which is 216. So q equals 625 divided by 216. So that's going to be one for the calculator. Just type in my secret password there and get it wrong. Try again. Okay, so clear that from the last one. 625 divided by 216 is, so 2.8935. So that's going to round to 2.89 to 2 decimal places. So in the table, 2.89. Okay, the next thing is we've got to figure out what p is when q is 12. So again, take the original thing and replace the q with a 12, and we get 12 is equal to 625 divided by p cubed, and we want to figure out what p is. So I'm going to get rid of the fraction by multiplying by p cubed. So I'll have just a whole 625 on the right, but on the left I'll have, instead of 12, 12p cubed, because I've multiplied both sides by p cubed. I'd like to get the p cubed bit on its own, so I'm going to divide by 12. So I need to divide the other side by 12. Okay, again I've got to unlock this. And get on the calculator, so clear that. Okay, so 625 divided by 12 is, oh, that's not a very friendly number, 52.083333 recurring. And then p has got to be the cube root of that, which luckily is something I can easily do on my calculator. And that comes to, there it is, 3.7345 and some other numbers. So that's 3.73 to 2 decimal places. So I'll fill out 3.73 in the table because it asks me to do it to 2 decimal places. 3.73, there we go. And on to the last question. So rub all this out. And the last question says that n is inversely proportional to the square root of m. Okay, so n and the square root of m are the two things involved in this question. And because they're inversely proportional, it means that the one thing equals some number that we've got to figure out divided by the other thing. And that some number we're going to call k. And we need to figure out what k is. We've got some information. We've got the information that when m equals 4, n equals 11. So we'll stick those numbers in here. So we've got n equal to 11 equals k over square root of 4. And of course this question's been constructed so that it's quite nice. The square root of 4 is a nice round number, it's just 2. So 11 equals k over 2. Multiply both sides by 2 and you get 22 is equal to k. So the relationship between n and m is that n is equal to 22 divided by the square root of m. So that's the relationship, and then we've just got to fill in the gaps in the table. So when m equals 7, what is n equal to? So n is going to be equal to 22 over the square root of 7. That's certainly going to be one for the calculator. Get my calculator out. Type in the password incorrectly again. There we go. So I want 22 divided by the square root of 7 equals 8.315, so that's rounding to 8.32 to 2 decimal places. So in the table 8.32, 8.32. Okay, and then the last one, when n equals 25, we've got to figure out what m is. Okay, so n is 25, so I'll replace the n with a 25. 25 equals 22 over root m. I'd like to get rid of the fraction, so I'll multiply both sides by the square root of m just to get a whole 22, get rid of the fraction. But then I've got to multiply the other side by the square root of m as well. So 25 times the square root of m equals 22. Excuse me. I quite like to know, I quite like to get the m bit on its own. So I'll divide by the 25 to get that the square root of m equals 22 divided by 25, which is 0.88. So the square root of m equals 0.88, and m must be 0.88 squared, 0.88 times 0.88. So let's just do that. 0.88 times 0.88 is 0.7744, which is going to round to 0.77. So in the box 0.77, and let's mark it. There we go, 16 out of 16, as we would have hoped.